Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. And joining me on this episode, you can find her on Twitter at R Financial Life. That's just the letter R Financial Life, or R Life Financial, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw it over to you to give yourself an introduction.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so thrilled to be here. And I just wanted to thank you again for all the support that you provide the dividend community and how you're creating such an amazing platform for everyone to share their stories and to share their favorite companies. And I have to point out two that I just recently watched that I think you just did, Investing Cage and Decade Investor. Those guys, oh my gosh, they're incredible. They are so impressive at 24 years old. And
Yeah,
at 24, like I wasn't even thinking about investing. Like that's just impressive. And they are certainly an inspiration to the younger generation and
for
older
sure.
generation too. I think that's absolutely amazing. And unlike those guys, I mean, I bought my first stock at 25 years old and I put $500 into an RRSP. And then I didn't put another cent into the account for probably 7 years. And
Right.
I started a little later. My husband, I mean, we got married young, we had kids young, we were paying down a mortgage, and our investments, we kind of veered in the way of real estate. So our journey is a little bit different in that we started with real estate, and it's not really until recently that we've been really focused on dividend investing. So that's
Awesome.
kind
Yeah. And that's all
of
right.
it.
Well, first, thank you. Thank you for the words about what I am trying to do here, creating this platform for everyone in the community to give them a
Mm-hmm.
voice. And I do really enjoy hearing the different paths, like you said. These kids, well, what we call kids in their mid 20s. Obviously, they're adults, but in their mid 20s, starting out very young and setting themselves up for a very bright future. But like I can understand your path too, getting married young, having kids, paying a mortgage, and just taking a different path. So I guess if you want to just maybe talk a little bit about that path before we get into talking about some of the different companies, or
Yeah,
not, up to you.
yeah, no, that's fine. Um, yeah, well, we bought a house young, and our mortgage at the time was 8.5%. So a little higher than what we're seeing today. But so our
Right,
main focus was let's get that mortgage paid down as soon as we can. So any extra money that we had went to pay off the mortgage. We did lump sum payments. We just wanted to clear that debt as soon as possible. And we were about, oh, I'd say early 30s, early to mid 30s when we paid it off. And, my parents had always been real estate, they had been involved in real estate and they were avid dividend investors too. And so they kind of convinced us to maybe remortgage our house and buy a rental property. And rather than just buying a rental property to rent out to a family or students or anything like that, I was in the mindset, well, I want something fun. I want a cottage or something, and let's buy something fun that we can enjoy, and then we can rent
right.
out not using it. So we ended up going that route, and again, mortgage rates were still pretty high in those days. So again, we focused on let's focus on this mortgage. We didn't put any money into the markets really, and yeah, so we kind of got involved in vacation rentals and we ended up going from one in Ontario to one in New York State, which is a completely other topic of conversation.
Yeah,
And we had that one as an Airbnb, and so that was an experience. And we also have a student rental that we still own, but it wasn't really until we sold our Airbnb, and we did that when COVID hit because the border was closed. We couldn't access our property. We were doing everything remotely. We had a property manager that would look after it for us, but we were very cognizant of getting down there once a month to check it out and deep clean and do all kinds of stuff, fix things that needed tweaking. And not being able to get down, that was a real headache for us. And so we ended up listing the property in 2020. We had actually listed it a couple years earlier just to kind of test the waters. And
right.
it wasn't, the real estate market there can be completely different. It's nothing like we experience here in Ontario. And so the first time we listed it, we had zero showing, zero interest. And there was a couple of properties nearby that had been up on the market for like years. And so then we kind of thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be stuck with this property. Like, how are we ever going to get out? And so COVID came, people started moving out of the big cities. And so we thought, okay, let's try this again. Let's see if, we can sell the property. And we did. And so that's when we had some proceeds from the sale. So that's when we kind of invested into the markets. And before 2020, like our dividend income was, I'd say probably 5 or 6,000. And so after we received our proceeds and we put it into the market, then we could start, really seeing the snowball take effect. And
Yeah.
especially when we reinvested dividends, then it just kept growing and growing. And it actually made us sit back and think, wow, why didn't we do this when we were like 30? Right? So that's kind of how we started.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very interesting story, interesting path. I love the idea of get starting with a cottage. So if you have a week or two off in the summer, you can go there
Yeah.
yourself and spend a week on the lake, and then the rest of the other 4 months or of the summer, spring and fall, whenever you can rent it out. Sure, that's
Mhm.
great. Did you have any kind of stresses through the winter though, when it was more difficult to rent?
Well, actually, our property in Ontario was in Collingwood, which is on Georgian Bay. And so it's more like a four season
Yeah,
area. It was busy all year round. And the same with our property in New York State. We didn't realize it's actually a ski town just south of Buffalo. And we thought it was, when we originally bought it, we thought, okay, well, I was a teacher, so we thought, okay, we'll use it in the summer and maybe we'll rent it out to skiers in the winter for a couple weekends here and there, and we'll come down with some friends. And it ended up being almost as popular in the summer and actually spring and fall too for golfers and hikers. And we were actually surprised in the end. It's truly a four season destination too. And so we were very, very fortunate in the areas that we chose for the vacation rentals. And we honestly just chose them because we liked the area. We didn't do
right.
a huge amount of research. We just, we like it here and let's look around at some properties. And it actually ended up working out really nicely. So that was a definite bonus. And when we had our property in Ontario, Airbnb wasn't even a thing. Like it wasn't even around yet.
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of just private advertising on, newspapers and Kijiji and online and stuff like that, right? And then when we had our property in New York State, Airbnb was so popular, and so it was so much easier to get our property out there, and we had no problems ever renting it. In fact, we turned people down because we wanted to use it, but we never had a problem. We were very fortunate.
That definitely comes back to the 3 main words in real estate, right? Location, location, location. You have a
When
ski hill in the winter, you have golf courses in the summer. I'm assuming if it's cottage type, there's lakes or whatnot around, so, yeah, you have your, canoeing and kayak crowd, like you said, hikers as well, so, yeah, location, location, location. I think you did very well for,
Yeah,
just like what you said, just because you like the area. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and even before that, so you mentioned that, uh, before you sold this property in 2020, you already had your dividend income up to 6 grand, which is actually quite good. And
Yeah.
so, and then now you see that snowball even obviously bigger.
Yes. Yeah. And so
Yeah,
I had, my husband had, I knew I wasn't going to get a very good pension because I started, I didn't really start teaching until I was, almost 40. And then I left at 49. So really that's not going to be very much. And I really didn't have a pension before that. And
right.
my husband, I mean, he's worked in the same industry for 30 years. So his pension is pretty good. So I started investing when I became a teacher, more so into my TFSA. And so I had my small
Yeah,
little RRSP that had slowly snowballed, even though I didn't put it hardly any money into it. And then my TFSA I started building up. So I was more the dividend investor, and he was more, I've got a pension, I'm okay. And Yeah, and then once we sold the property, then he was like, okay, well, I want to invest in some dividend stocks too.
Yeah, I like this idea of getting paid to not work for this company, right?
Right? I
It's
know.
I love it. It's my favorite.
It's awesome.
Speaking of dividends, let's give a shout out to Investing T-shirts. You can the link in the description. Use the code word posse to check out the merch over there. And yeah, let's start talking about some of the different companies and sectors that you've invested in over the years.
Okay.
I guess what was the first company or sector of companies that you started to focus on, and why did you like that
Um,
particular sector?
well, I can tell you, I know my first three companies I invested in. I don't know which one I bought first, but there was Bank of Nova Scotia, Enbridge, and TransCanada Pipeline. Those were my three for the longest time in the RRSP. And then once we started, my husband started getting involved. He has a lot of different companies than I own, but we are heavily invested in the banks. Like, we love the Canadian banks. And I know if someone would look at our portfolio and they'd probably think, oh my gosh, you have like 43% of your portfolio in banks. But I love them. And our theory is if the banking system goes down, like, we're all kind of up the creek without a paddle. So you might as
Yeah.
well invest in something that you're confident in, that you think is gonna be around for the next few decades, and just sit back and keep growing those dividends. And so, finance the banks for us. We don't own all of them, but we do own four of the big five. We own Bank of Montreal, Royal, TD, and Bank of Nova Scotia. And then we also own Laurentian Bank. Both of us own Laurentian Bank. I was impressed that they hired a woman CEO, so I bought it for that reason. And I think she's really going to turn things around. But yeah, we are definitely heavily invested in the banks.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know if you have had a chance to watch. I had a great conversation with Dividend John about 2 months ago, and his portfolio is also very heavy in the Canadian banks,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to go wrong. You know, they've been paying dividends for, I think it's Bank of Montreal coming up on a 200-year anniversary of paying dividends, and Bank of Nova Scotia isn't far behind them on the 200-year anniversary, and all of them over 150 years of paying a dividend. So, you
I
know,
know it.
you see that longevity and consistency of dividend payments, and you just say, "Well, okay, they're odds are good they're gonna keep paying that dividend, and over time, keep raising that dividend as well."
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's been years where they haven't been allowed to raise their dividend, but they're still paying a dividend. So,
Yeah.
I can take those years where they don't raise their dividend because I know that the dividend raise is coming. And when it comes, it's going to be a pretty decent raise. So, yeah, they are staples in our portfolio for sure.
Yeah, and so like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
Hmm.
Not financial advice for anybody who's watching or listening, but it is hard to go wrong with the Canadian banks
Yeah, it
in
is.
the majority of people's opinions, I would say.
So I know you're heavily invested
You
in.
also mentioned,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, say again?
I know you're heavily invested in REITs.
Yeah, I am. Do you want to talk about REITs next?
Sure. You can do a lot of the talking because I only own Northwest Healthcare REIT. That's the only one I own, and my husband owns two, I think, Extendicare and Melcor. So those are the only REITs that we have. Um, Only because we have, our student rental still, and so we feel like we're involved in the real estate market, with physical
Right.
property, but they are a huge advantage for people who don't want to invest in physical real estate. I mean, REITs are excellent for that, just to have exposure to real estate.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. As well, much lower barrier to entry. You know, you can
Yeah.
buy
Oh
one
yeah.
share of a REIT for say $10 or $20. You can't buy a physical real estate property for $10 or $20. I also own Northwest Healthcare and Extendicare EXE.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, as you know, I also have RioCan, a good chunk of that. Automotive Properties is one that I like. It's based more in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, but they own the physical like the car lots where the car dealerships are. So if you think of like 1,000 cars on a lot, that's a lot of acreage in a place like Vancouver, where I'm sure you're aware how crazy the real estate, how crazy the price of land is in Vancouver. So I
Oh
look at
yeah.
that going, that's an expensive, or that's, they own property that's worth a lot of money is kind of
Yeah.
my logic there, right?
Yeah.
And again, obviously being a REIT, they pay a nice dividend monthly. So I just sit back every month and say, again, I just say thank you for paying me to not work for you.
It's awesome. I know. We've actually looked at that.
um,
We've looked into that automotive one with the dealerships because we were kind of interested in that one for a little bit. Um, yeah, it sounds like a good one to own for sure.
yeah, just the price of the real estate, price of
Mm.
land in Vancouver alone makes it. I lived in Vancouver for a long time as well, so I'm well aware of how the insane price increase. The year 2000 to now has just
Mhm.
been unreal. Awesome. Sorry.
So what other do you
I
want
did
to
hear you
talk about?
mention Enbridge there.
Oh yeah.
I did hear you mention Enbridge there as well. Let's get your thoughts on not just Enbridge, but sort of the whole energy and utilities sector, oil and gas and renewables, anything that you might kind of fall under that umbrella.
Yeah, we are heavily invested in the energy sector too. It's financials, and energy for us, really. The pipelines, I can't get enough of the pipelines. And I love Enbridge. Enbridge is our second largest holding after Bank of Nova Scotia. And I think TransCanada Pipeline is after that. And we own PPL too. Um, but about, we owned ARC Resources, and then we kind of got out of oil and gas until just after the pandemic. And then we started buying more oil and gas. And it's been a great investment for us the last year and a half. I mean, the small cap Canadian ones, maybe not so much. I have faith in them, but like Suncor and Exxon, we've done really well on our investments there. I don't see them as being forever holds like the banks or the pipelines, but we're holding them for now just to kind of see what happens. And Exxon, I think on Friday hit an all-time high stock price. Like it's just it's been amazing for us, and we're kind of curious. We have cashed out shares here and there, and so we have taken our capital out, our initial capital. But we're kind of interested just to see how high they go because, like,
Yeah.
I have a feeling this year that WTI is going to go you know, close to $100 again. I mean, I'm hoping so, but you can never tell, right? One day it's up and then the next day everything's
Yeah.
in the red. So who knows? It's a very volatile sector. And that's why I feel more comfortable with the pipelines because, um, they're longer term holds for us because it's going to be hard to build any more pipelines. So for us, that is a place to get our energy exposure once we get out of all the oil and gas producers. So
And I do have to ask you your thoughts. You didn't mention it, so I'm guessing you don't own it, but Algonquin Power, obviously they had a dividend cut about a month or so ago.
I
Um,
did. I
Thoughts
did.
on Algonquin Power?
Yeah, I owned it. And
Sorry?
I owned it and I bought it at ridiculously high prices. And I can't even tell you when I bought it. It seems like forever ago. And ever since I bought it, it just went down and down and down and slowly. And I got the dividends, but the stock price just kept going down. And I just thought I had so many times where I thought, I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to get rid of it. And I didn't. And I kept holding it. And because I thought, they've got a good business plan. This might work out and it'll come back. And we were away actually when the announcement came out, or I can't even remember what happened there. I don't even think they announced, maybe they did announce it. They must have announced it. And within one day, the stock price just fell.
Yeah.
And we were away and we came back and I saw everyone talking about it on Twitter. And I was like, what's going on with Algonquin? So I started researching it, and then I was like, okay, I'm done. So I sold them all, 43% loss, but I was just like, I'm cutting my losses and I'm moving on. Like, this has just not been a happy company to own for me for like a year and a half. So I was done. So I sold, and yeah. How about you?
Yeah, so I I have some Algonquin Power. I still hold it, and I didn't really have a large enough position. I mean, I think we all saw the writing on the wall that the dividend cut was coming, and so when it did come, and then the price obviously dropped, and it's kind of in the last month it restabilized slightly. And I for me right now, I'm just letting it, just holding it. You know, I'll still get the
Mhm.
dividend. It's sure it's going to be less of a dividend, but I'm okay with that for now. Like I said, it's a small position in my portfolio, so it's not hurting me that much to, on that, because again, I bought it obviously at a much higher price as well, and you watch it drop, and so yeah, you're in the red on it, and you
Yeah.
just hope someday it goes back up. But in the meantime, I'll just let it ride. I'm not
Mhm.
overly concerned about that one myself personally, right as
Yeah.
of right now.
Yeah. I'm just not too I guess it was the management. I just didn't feel that they were very forthcoming in their announcements. And I was just, yeah, I just wanted to cut my losses and be done.
Understandable, understandable, 110%. Um, what are your thoughts on telecommunications? Bell, Telus, Rogers, Quebecor?
Yeah, I've never owned Rogers or Quebecor. I have Telus and Bell. I've owned Bell for, oh, probably 15 years, and Telus probably for, 10. And yeah, I like them both. I right now I feel like if I had extra money, I would be putting it into Telus rather than Bell Canada, only because I think Telus has a lot more growth opportunity, I guess, as compared to Bell.
Yeah,
I like them both. I really like them both. I'm a believer that they are going to be long term holds in our portfolio. But yeah, our focus right now is building our Telus position over Bell. Yeah.
understandable. And so the only reason I'm focused more on Bell instead of Telus is because I'm a Bell customer, and you've probably heard the saying, "Turn that cash register around." So it's just like I'm focusing on buying shares in Bank of Nova Scotia because they hold the mortgage on the lovely
Mhm.
set here of the Passive Income Podcast, and Bell Canada. Hydro One is another one. If looking back to the
Mm.
whole energy and utility, and you're in Ontario, so I'm sure that means you pay your bill to Hydro One as well. So I'm like, it just makes sense for me to own the companies that I'm paying money to get them to pay money back to me, right?
Yeah. No, I totally get it. That's a great way to look at it, especially for people that are just starting out. That's something that they can focus on for sure. Because if they're a customer, then there are other customers out there, and you might as well have them pay your bill with their dividends, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, you mentioned Hydro One. That's one that we've looked into once or twice. Um, as far as utilities go, we own Fortis and Canadian Utilities, and I'm a huge believer in Fortis. Again, similar to Bell and Telus, if we were to put more money into one of those right now, our focus would be more on Fortis, just because
right.
I think it's I think we could get appreciation in the price plus their dividend and it's consistently going up. And I sometimes question if CU is, they just want to stay at the top of the leaderboard of having the, increase their dividend for 50 years. And Fortis is number two on that list. But I wonder sometimes, you know, are they doing it just because they want to stay in that top position? And maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like
Yeah.
sometimes, I feel like Fortis is a much better company for us moving forward.
Yeah, and I get it too, like you said, going back to Talos and with Fortis, if you see the potential for more growth there, then yeah, it does make sense for you. That's the one you wanna, you know, dollar cost average into, keep building your
Mhm.
position in those companies and let your other ones ride if you have them and just again let that dividend roll in every with those companies would be every quarter. So just, let it ride every three
Mhm.
months. Say thank you for paying me to not work for you. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, so another sector I really like to talk, and as you know, I talk to a lot of Americans. So when I bring up consumer staples and consumer discretionary, the Walmarts and Costcos and Cokes and Pepsis of the world come up. Do you play consumer discretionary, consumer staples any different with anything in the Canadian market?
Um, that's a very low sector in our portfolio, to be honest. And I look at it often because I think we should build that up, but there's never really a lot of companies that pique my interest. Right now, we have what do we have? We have Cascade and we have KP Tissue. I mean, those are in the consumer industry, tissue and toilet
Right.
paper. Um, but no, we haven't. That's a really. I mean, I would say our portfolio it's less than 1%. So I've never really.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've never really. I know that that's a smart sector to be involved in because it's everyday products that everyone's buying. But yeah, I don't know if it's just the dividends have never really appealed to me because they're a lot lower than some other sectors. Uh, and growth really to me, I mean there is growth, but it's very slow, and I just find that there's other opportunities in other sectors that are more appealing. So,
Yeah, fair enough.
mhm,
I think the argument, like you said, it's a smart sector to be in. The argument there is it's more of a recession-proof sector because people still have to eat every day. People still have to get their daily products,
mhm,
your soap, your toothpaste, whatever from wherever.
mhm,
Um, and I play the sector a little bit differently where I have like pizza. I have I can't even remember what else I have, but companies like that. Oh, SRV, which is they own restaurants within their portfolio. I
mhm,
don't have things like, Boston Pizza or the Keg or A&W, but obviously those have been on my watch list for a long, long time.
mhm.
And, obviously those are a little bit less recession proof because people are gonna stop going out to eat,
Yeah,
but people are still gonna eat. Like, that's my argument with Pizza is people are gonna eat pizza no matter what, So
yeah.
and, and again, I was talking to, I think, Dividend Daddy way back about Pizza. We were like, "Yeah, honestly, no, I'd probably myself personally, I'd go to Pizza as my first choice and maybe Little Caesars as my second choice, and Pizza might be my third choice, personally for what I'm actually eating, but as a company, it's one of my top choices, for me, I like it. It pays a nice monthly dividend, and I'm happy with it, so
Oh, good. What is the
and
dividend?
obviously, it's a little bit different than pardon me?
Oh, what's the dividend on the pizza one? What's the dividend yield?
Dividend on Pizza. Oh, I don't even have Yahoo Finance, so
Okay,
I'll,
I can look it up.
I'll put that in the comments.
Okay, perfect.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Um,
I have looked at
fine.
owning like Loblaw and George Weston and Empire a few times, but um, yeah, I mean it's just not a sector that draws me into investing. I don't think for some reason. I don't know why, because it's silly, like you said. It's everyday products. It's people are spending money on it every day, but it's just never
Yeah.
really appealed to me for some reason.
Yeah, Loblaws, Empire, Metro, kind of the biggest grocery chains that are Canadian owned,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously there's competing with the Costcos and Walmarts that are in Canada as well, but, you look at those, 3 companies. And yeah, I don't own any of them either, but yeah, obviously they've been on my watch list for a while as well. And
Mm-hmm.
you also have to, I'm sure you're well aware, you can't buy everything, right? You gotta
No.
have to limit your portfolio to whatever you feel comfortable with, whether it's, some people I've had on and only have 10 or 12, different
Mm-hmm.
positions, different companies. And some people have 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 30 plus, 40 plus, like everybody's different. And that's what I love about talking to everybody like yourself is you get all these different ideas, different strategies, and you come to the conclusion that there's not just one right way to go about this, right?
Hmm.
There's several wrong ways.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I know.
There's
We
definitely
have
several
about,
wrong ways to do it.
sometimes I question whether we have too many companies in our portfolio because I think we have about 35 in our portfolio right now, and it just seems like a lot. And I said to my husband, it's like, okay, we have our own ETF growing here, but we don't like I don't have ETFs. We don't invest in ETFs, and you see some ETFs that have hundreds of companies, and I'm not interested in owning hundreds of companies. But in saying that, whenever we're doing our research or looking at companies, sometimes one that we've never really heard of that, kind of piques our interest and we want to invest in it and it sounds really interesting. And so, occasionally we keep adding to our portfolio, but it's that same question, like, when is enough enough? Like, we shouldn't be adding more. We should be, maybe we should be eliminating some from our list. So it's a
Yeah,
hard
I'm
balance.
actually in that 2025 range.
Yeah.
I'm in that 20 to 25 range, and I'm kind of thinking the same thing. Is like, should I eliminate some of these and get
Yeah.
down to, that 15 to 20 range, and maybe it's more manageable. Maybe I can just focus on increasing the positions I do have. And but again, like I said, there's so many different right ways to do it, and
There is.
it's whatever each individual person feels comfortable with, right?
Yeah, yeah. And when you think about eliminating them to about 15 companies, well, I don't want to sell any of my banks and I don't want to sell any of my pipelines. So it's like, well, how do I limit the rest of, to make that 15? Like, what else am I going to keep? It's hard because I want everything that I have
Right.
right now, right?
Well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having 30 to 35
No.
either. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
for me, that's where I'm at,
yeah,
and for you, that's where you're at. And I
true.
don't think either one of us are doing it wrong. We're just
No,
and there's not really that big of a difference between 25 and 35 either in at the end of the day. So
yeah, no,
I don't know,
totally.
just a thought, I guess.
No, no, it's true, and everyone has their own journey, and everyone has their own stock picks, and what I own and what you own. It's what we personally feel uh, we want to have in our portfolio, and it doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. It's just our own personal journey, and as long as they pay a dividend, we're happy campers.
That's right, 110%. What about transportation? Obviously, here in Canada, the big ones are CN and CP. Any
Hmm.
thoughts on the railways?
Yeah, I love them. I love them, but I don't own them. But I love them.
Yeah,
And we did own CP for a while, and we bought it, and then this price went up, and so we sold it because I personally don't feel like I can own CP for the dividend because the dividend is not it's not what is it? I don't even know what it is right now. It's probably 1% or something.
yeah, it's a
And
low
to me,
yield.
yeah, and so to me, that's not something that I would own for dividend, but I love them. And I did own TFI, which is a big trucking company, and I owned it from way back. And during the pandemic, their price just shot up, and so I was, happy. And oh my gosh, like, look at, maybe I should sell it. Maybe I should sell it. And so I sold it at, I think it was just over 500% gain. But then, a week later, they announced that they were going to buy FedEx or UPS or whoever they bought in the US, the division, and then the stock doubled again. And so, I mean, I ended up making money, but this is the way I do investing. I sell something and then the next day they announce something and then it goes crazy. But they were a great company and they're still a great company. Um, and I regret selling them now, obviously, but hindsight's 2020, right? And now when I look at their share price, $160 or whatever it was on Friday, uh, I don't know if I can buy them back. I would never get that kind of growth, I don't think, again. And so I don't own them anymore, and I don't own CP. We watch CP and CNR all the time. Not saying, if the price is right, we would jump on those ones for sure. But yeah, right now we don't have any transportation. No.
I would say do not be disappointed with a 500% gain.
No. Yeah.
And
No.
obviously it's impossible to time the market, so I
Yeah.
think you did quite well making that gain that you did make, and don't
Yeah.
regret the fact that you didn't make 1,000% the next day.
Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah, you have to be happy when you make a gain regardless, because, for every gain there's usually a loss somewhere in the portfolio, right?
Yeah, and you just want those gains to outweigh the losses, be
True.
a pretty
A
decent
pretty
margin,
Yeah,
obviously.
a pretty good percentage, that's for sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure you've watched enough of episodes of the podcast to know that outside that window over there, there's a CN train that goes by every
Oh,
30 or 40 minutes. So I'm
okay.
constantly thinking about CN as well. So I don't own it either. Kind of same logic is like it's a pretty low yield, and how much more room for growth is there? Maybe
Yeah.
long term there is. So maybe if you're a younger investor and you're in your like these kids we were talking about, young adults in their 20s, maybe for them it's something to look at. And at
Mhm.
our stage, maybe we're trying to focus on some a little bit higher yield so that
True.
we can get to that retirement, um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And I think
the
CP with
happy
this
retirement.
CP with the Kansas City, right? It's the Kansas City deal with for CP. I mean, if that goes through, that's huge.
Yeah,
That's huge for I mean, Canada as a country. First of all, to have a railroad that's got all of that exposure, like that will be incredible. Um, so if that goes through, yeah, they're going to be a very interesting company to watch over the next decade or more for sure.
cool, cool. And so you mentioned your husband and the pension plan and yourself teaching for a relatively short period of time. I
Mhm.
guess you raised the kid first and then went back to work for a little bit.
I did.
Do you would you consider yourself in the fire community, financial independence, retire early, or are you still working on goals to get there?
Um, well, we're always working on goals. But
Okay,
yeah,
good answer. Good
yeah,
answer.
my husband, he just retired actually. Like 2 weeks ago, he retired, and so we're both retired now. And so I would say our dividends right now cover our living expenses for our primary residence. We also have living expenses for our rental property. Obviously, the rent takes care of those expenses, but we always like to include those in our personal expenses just in case we're stuck at a time where our property doesn't have any tenants. But yeah, so our dividends definitely can take care of our expenses for our home. But yeah, like I said before, he's got a pretty decent pension, and I have a teeny tiny one. But and then with our rental property, we have multiple sources of income. And I remember my dad growing up, he had a pension from an employer. It wasn't a big one, but he said never count on your pension. So that's, they kind of had rental properties which they sold, and then they were very avid dividend investors. So they were the ones that convinced me, don't buy stocks for purely growth. Get a dividend growth company that raises their dividend. The price will go up with the dividend increases. And so he always had multiple sources of income too, because he was always worried that a pension could be taken away at any time if the company that he had worked for all of a sudden struggled. And he was working in the airline business, and the airline business can be like crazy volatile, and his company got purchased by multiple other airlines over the years. And so he was always really worried, and so he kind of instilled that in me and my husband. And he was kind of like, you might have pensions, but you have to have something else to back it up just in case, right? So yeah, we're
Right.
fortunate in the fact that we have our rental property, we have our dividend income, and now we have our pensions. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're still somewhat working because obviously taking care of rental properties, it is passive income, but it's not as passive as dividends or some other types of passive income. So
True.
Um, would you consider yourself completely retired or semi-retired? Like just sort of with that definition of rental properties still
No,
requiring some hands-on effort and work.
no, I would say we're retired. We
Okay,
don't
good answer.
we're
Awesome.
our we have a student rental, so there's the kids that are living there. I mean, they're in their early 20s, but and they're really good. We've I mean, touch wood, we've been so lucky with our students. They've been they've kept the property really nice and clean, and they usually, because they're young and they're kids, they usually call as soon as, oh, something's making a noise, or a handle came off one of the cupboards, or, they're very uh, cognizant, and let's call the landlord and have them come over. And we've trained them, if you hear anything, or if the toilet keeps dripping, like, call us right away. Like, the longer you leave it, the bigger problem it's going to get. So call us as soon as possible. And really, I would say, I see on Twitter all the time, people are saying that, oh, my rental property, I'm there like all the time. Honestly, I could probably say we put in, I wouldn't even go as far as saying 40 hours a year in
Oh,
dealing with issues with the rental property. It's actually, it's really good. And I love renting to students, because in 3 years they're out, and then there's another group coming in, right? So it's not like you have the same, family or individual or whoever it might be living in your property. And they may not keep it tidy or anything like that, and you have them for X amount of years. And that the Landlord Tenant Act, I mean, you know, not that it's a bad thing, but tenants have a lot of rights. And to try to get a tenant out, especially if they don't pay you, it's a lengthy process. And COVID only
right.
added to that length of time. So it can be a real headache, but thankfully we've been very, very fortunate. And honestly, I love renting to students for that reason.
Awesome. No, that's great that, you know, 40 hours a year is a lot different than 40 hours a week. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to quickly bring up your link tree here. If you just want to talk
Right.
through this a little bit,
Yeah. So I
I
have
see
a
you have a
monthly
monthly newsletter.
I do. I have a monthly newsletter, and that's where I talk about our dividend income and the stocks in our portfolio, and stocks that we may have purchased. Like in my January one, I mentioned the TFSA. We both contributed to our TFSAs, the 6,500, and I mentioned what we bought. And I show the price return for our investments, our portfolio, the companies that we own in our portfolio. And I'm kind of veering away from my blog. I did have a blog, and I'm kind of moving more to this newsletter now, because I really only want to publish it for people who are genuinely interested, rather than having a blog that, anyone can go on and read our information. Because I'm just finding that we are talking about our income, and I am talking about our portfolio. And I just feel like, if people genuinely really are interested and they want to read our information, then, they can read the newsletter, rather than just random people going to my website. So I've just started that newsletter in January. And Five Eye Research is a great company that is Canadian, that you can sign up for their stock analysis. And they have an online forum where you can ask questions. And they also, the financial planners, that advisors that run that site, they also have a magazine. Oh, Canadian Money Saver, it might be. I'm I'd have to look that up. I think it's Canadian Money Saver, and it's a great magazine. Like, I absolutely love it. And so I'm a huge supporter of Five Eye Research. So they've provided me with a link that people can sign up and receive 25% off their memberships. And I highly recommend them, because their analysis is really current and very up to date, and a lot of information. And the third one there is, oh, Wealth Simple. Yeah, so for anyone starting out, Wealthsimple, as you know, is a great platform that you can use as a brokerage, and you can trade Canadian equities for free. There's no trading costs. And when I started out investing way back when, you know, I had to pay, I think it was $29.95 to make a trade. Like it was crazy. And my parents, who never really learned about online banking or never had the opportunity to because they were investing in the 70s and 80s where they had to buy a newspaper once a week and see what their stocks were valued at,
Right.
they would call into the broker and it would cost them, you know, $60, $70 to make a trade. And so now with something like Wealthsimple, like it is amazing. And young kids, you know, can get involved in investing, and it's, you know, no fees for Canadian equities. I mean, that's incredible. And you know, they offer RRSPs, TFSAs, non-registers, you know, crypto. They offer it all, and it's just an easy platform. So I love Wealthsimple. We don't have a lot of our portfolio in Wealthsimple, but we have started to use it a little bit more. And anyone who asks us, you know, what should I, you know, should I, what account should I open? We are pushing the Wealthsimple only because, you know, it's free trading. Why not?
Yeah. And so, just a couple of things there. I will link, or I will put your link tree in the description. At the bottom there was the connection to your socials as well, so you can find your
Okay,
Instagram and Twitter.
perfect.
And exactly what you were saying, I recall those days too of the 29.95 and the 9.5. And so when Wealthsimple came along and it was all of a sudden free, zero commission, $0 in commissions, and now fractional shares as well. So it's like
Yeah.
you don't need to have, 500 or $1,000 just to start. You can literally start with 10, 20, $50, whatever you might have, and you can buy half of a share of Bank of Nova Scotia, for example, for about 30 or $35, whatever the price is right now. So
Yeah,
I would
it's
agree with you
excellent.
110%. Wealthsimple is a great place uh,
Mhm.
to start out, and I mean, I continue to use it to this day because between the choice of paying $10 in commission or zero, well, I would prefer to pay the zero.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, we're still paying the 9.99 because most of our portfolio is with the banks because that's where we started, right? And just to move it over, although I did see Wealthsimple um, on their app yesterday or the day before, they're offering free money to people who are willing to transfer over their accounts, like TFSAs, or depending on the amount that you're transferring, they will I think they'll pay for the fees for you to transfer. You'll have to check, but they'll also offer you a cash bonus for transferring your account over, which is fantastic. Like honestly, it's a great platform, and they do have a lot of incentives like that. So people should constantly keep looking and seeing what incentives offering at the time, because like we've said, they're an excellent platform.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Any other sectors that we haven't talked about? We talked about technology. There's obviously a lot less technology in the Canadian market.
Yeah,
Other than that, we haven't really talked about healthcare. Obviously, healthcare is way different in Canada than the US. We did kind of talk about the healthcare REITs, such as Northwest Healthcare and Extendicare.
yeah.
Um, Anything else you kind of want to touch on before we? I see we're
No,
already pushing, getting.
um,
We're going to be
yeah,
over 50 minutes here real soon. We keep talking, we'll be to an hour in no time.
yeah, and it's Super Bowl Sunday. Like what? I have to talk really fast. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry. I said, yeah, it's Super Bowl Sunday. I have to talk really fast. Let's watch the game. Like we have to get to our parties. um, yeah, and healthcare, we only own those REITs, and then technology, the only tech stock I own right now is Intel. That's the only one. Can you hear me?
Right. So we didn't really talk about anything in. Do you have, other than obviously you just said Intel, but do you have stuff in the U.S. markets as well? Then.
Yeah, we only own 5 companies in the U.S. We own Intel, Exxon. My husband just bought Ford, and Williams Company, and AT&T. So those are the only US companies we own. Obviously, I like looking at Meta and Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and all these, the FANG stocks. But yeah, I've never really pulled the plug on buying any of those tech stocks. They're great companies, but I just find that their value is quite high, and I just haven't seen a good price for buy-in for me personally. But they're amazing companies, and in Canada, I mean, we're lucky to have
Yeah.
Constellation Software and OpenText. I mean, there's some great companies in Canada too. But again, same thing. Point of entry for me needs to be a little bit lower, but they're amazing companies. Amazing.
Yeah, awesome. I would agree with that. There are a lot of great, amazing U.S. companies, and it is obviously a little bit more difficult for us in Canada. We're
Mhm.
dealing with that exchange rate as well, which isn't exactly favorable right now. And so, for me personally, it's just like I can buy a lot of really good companies on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Someday down the road, if the exchange rate is more favorable, I can look at a lot of those great American companies as well. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else you would like to say before we end?
Oh boy. Not that I can think of, no, other than, the point of, the main point of us being out on social media and YouTube and, everywhere else is to just, encourage people to get started. And I think, the earlier you start, obviously the better, but you can start at any age. I mean, my parents were older when they started investing and they did very well. So it doesn't age shouldn't be a factor on whether you're going to invest or not. So it's just starting. And I think dividend uh, companies provide an easy way to build an income for yourself, whether it's, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, or 30 years down the road. So just start.
Yeah, I would agree. My Moneyball reference that I'm sure you've probably heard, just get on base. Just get on
Mhm.
base. Just get on base. Get started. You're not going to hit a grand slam on that first stock that you buy, and you don't need to. You just need to get on base. You're right.
Yeah.
Like just get started. And whether you're like we were talking about some of the younger people, and I got to stop calling them kids because they obviously are adults in their 20s. Um, but just get started. Whether you're in your mid 20s, 30s, 40s, it doesn't really. Just get started. And like you just said, dividends are a great way to start building that passive income. In my opinion, it's the best way to start building passive income.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
agree.
with that said, I just wanted to I just want to thank you so much for spending an hour of your time with me here on the Passive Income Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure uh, having a conversation with you. I hope uh, I hope you settled down and were less nervous as we got going.
I was a little bit.
Nice. Oh,
Thank you. Thank you
so
so much
again,
for
like I
having me.
said, thank you so much,
Yeah.
and please be sure to check out the link in the description for the buy investing shirts and subscribe